Well, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Alexis Rogers and I'm the customer relationship lead here at RightCapital. I hope everyone's having a wonderful week so far, and welcome to our Presenting Your First Plan webinar. The goal of this webinar today is to just help you build confidence and become more familiar with presenting a financial plan in RightCapital and leveraging all the resources that we have, and of course, addressing all the different ways you can present while using RightCapital. Today, we're going to be walking through those different ways you can establish a narrative in RightCapital. We're going to talk about a couple different ways, whether you're screen sharing and presenting in person or using PDF deliverables for your reports. We're going to be highlighting all the different resources that you have for whatever method you think fits best for the client that you are presenting to. We're going to walk through those different presentation tactics and allow for you to have those as an additional resource in your toolbox when going forward and leveraging RightCapital. And we're going to also talk about how to fine-tune your presentation flow for whichever route you do take. Of course, there's no wrong route to take, but this is going to be walking through those tips and tricks of establishing a very smooth and efficient conversation with the client. And we're also going to be walking through one of the other presentation modes that we have, which is called the client access mode, but we fondly refer to it as the client presentation mode, and how this can be further leveraged if we are doing a live presentation. Today, we are going to be working on the Lannister family plan. Just for some background for the Lannisters, we're going to be navigating to the profile blueprint section, where we're going to get that nice picture of what the client's current plan looks like. We're going to show here what their current net worth looks like. We're going to touch on their goals, income, savings, and expenses. So especially when we start the meeting with the client, if we wanted to review what the current path looks like, this is a great space, as we're going to be doing in a couple seconds, to review what the current plan looks like and make sure that everything is in line with what we would expect and if anything has changed. The blueprint section is going to be a key visualization of everything that you entered in the current plan. So it's going to be summarizing the net worth, the goals, income, savings, and expenses. And this is a fully interactive presentation space as well. Blueprint is available for both PDF reports, of course. You can still have all these great visualizations included in the PDF deliverable. But if we are screen sharing or presenting live in person, that allows for us to have a little bit more of a nuance here, as this is intended to be a fully interactive presentation source. In Blueprint, we can see here, of course, under net worth, starting here, who owns what. We can check in about their ages, who we're planning for. We can show what their current net worth looks like. But let's say when we're in that meeting, the client lets us know that they've actually added some additional money to their bank account. We can actually click directly into the joint checking account. It'll open up a drawer in which we can start to make adjustments pretty swiftly. So we can change that balance and hit the save button to save that change. As soon as we make that change, that will be adjusting their net worth and will also be feeding throughout the entirety of their projections as well. So this is intended to be a smooth and efficient space to have a lot of conversations with clients, while also fostering a easily digestible visualization for them to look at their current net worth. So not only can you have this space to have that conversation, but you can also add additional items directly here as well. So if they let you know that they've actually added another credit card, they took out another debt, you can quickly click on the add button and you can add anything that you could have added back in net worth. So we can add a credit card here, for example. We can enter those same parameters of what the current credit card balance is, set who the owner is, indicate what they're telling you is their minimum and monthly payments, and also the APR. So the data entry is going to remain the same, but this is just a nice way to have that interactive space to quickly make adjustments, especially as you touch on that current plan. And if anything in their lives has shifted since you last spoke, you can easily make adjustments from here. Not only can you make those immediate changes, but you can also customize the narrative that we are looking at here. So we can actually click on this edit button right here, and this will open up a screen in which we can include or exclude certain items from the blueprint narrative. So for example, if we had one of those credit cards that's actually going to be closing tomorrow, maybe this loan is closing tomorrow and we don't want to talk about it, anything like that, you do have the option to include or exclude whatever you want from this narrative. It still is going to be included in plan if it's indicated to be included in plan. It's just whether or not you want it in this visualization for your discussion on the current plan. And that's how you can adjust the net worth. But going into the goals section, this is going to be a map of what their goals look like across their lifetime. So we can see here we've got that college goal coming up pretty shortly. We see them retiring a little bit shortly after that, and we show their long-term care costs. So this is going to be that easily digestible visualization of what their life path looks like. But once again, you can also have that interactive aspect, especially for presenting live or in person or screen sharing. We can add an item directly here. So if they let you know that they're taking a vacation next year, we can click on the add button and the drop down from here. We can add that vacation, enter that annual amount, set who the owner is, indicate when this goal is going to be happening, if this is going to be recurring, and we can hit save. As you can see, when we make those adjustments, it's updating their life map, and it's also going to be feeding into their future projections as well. So you can easily add things directly within the Blueprint module for any of these sections. You can once again edit the visualization and what's included in the visualization in Blueprint by clicking on the edit button. There is an additional nuance to the goals where we have a lot of recurring goals that might be happening across a client's lifetime, including things like their retirement monthly expenses, which are going to be recurring until they pass away, things like their long-term care cost goals or events, and also college goals, for example. For those that are going to be recurring across multiple years, you have an additional ability to indicate whether or not you want that goal to be displaying across every year that it's occurring in the goal map, or if you only want it to display for the first year only. So for example, we can choose that for the retirement monthly expenses. We want it to display for every year and hit save. When we do that, now we're going to show when they retire, that retirement monthly expense is occurring every single year. It's going to be a lot longer of a map because their retirement monthly expenses are happening until they pass away for the next couple decades. So that's what it would look like if you activated it for something that's a little bit more of a long-standing recurring goal. For us, we're going to keep it a little bit more simple. We're going to have this just display for the first year only and hit save. Because we know it's going to be recurring, but we just want to show that start time for that specific goal. Next, under our income, savings, and expenses section, this is going to be a visualization of exactly what the name entails, their income, savings, and expenses. You can once again make adjustments directly for any of these entries if needed. So especially as we're having our conversations at the beginning of the year, if they've let you know that they've changed their 401k elections or their employer has, you can quickly click into that 401k card and make those necessary adjustments within the contribution fields. The same is true for the salary. If they hopefully got a pay raise, you can also make those adjustments swiftly and continue on with your conversation with the client. So you can just click into each of these existing cards, and you can also add additional income, savings, and expenses as necessary as well. You also have the option to click on the edit button and include or exclude certain income, savings, and expenses from this visualization if needed. So this is fully customizable in terms of the narrative that you can have within the Blueprint module when discussing their current plan. But this is a great way to check in, make sure that everything still is in line with our current path, if anything has changed since we last spoke, and just to have a nice, easy to digest visualization of all that information in RightCapital. Once we discuss what the current plan looks like, that's typically when we navigate towards our other conversations and those maybe proposals that you're going to be looking at and things along those lines. So now we've talked about what that current path looks like. One of the other common ways to present, and the next module that we'd be going towards would be the dashboard snapshot module. Here under dashboard snapshot, this is going to be another space with key visualizations. This is a very powerful space as this is pulling all of those key visuals and key information that you might be covering in a client meeting, and it's pooling it all into one space. So this is pulling across all the modules of RightCapital and putting it into this one nice, easy to discuss space It's also a way for you to establish a nice presentation flow from here as well. You're going to see a couple things that are already included in the snapshot, but this is once again fully customizable. If there's something that's already included that we don't want to talk about or it's not relevant for this client meeting, you can always hit the X mark for any of those visualizations and hit the delete button. That'll remove it from the snapshot here. We can also drag and drop each of the different widgets to reorder the flow of what we're going to be discussing. So let's actually bring the notes further up. Maybe we want to talk about it over here. Maybe it's the first thing we kind of want to address besides the probability of success. So we can kind of reorder the flow of what we're going to be talking about here. You can also add additional items. So if we wanted to add additional key metrics, we wanted to talk about the savings rate. We also wanted to talk about another key metric, the retirement income stability ratio, an important factor for their retirement. And maybe we also are going to be talking about their stress tests as well. So they are very nervous about a couple different things like inflation in this economy. We can include the stress tests here and have that conversation. So this is going to be a space where we can have a lot of great conversations. Once again, you can reorder the flow of what you talk about. So maybe we want to talk about allocation, not as the first thing. We can kind of change this flow. And that's how you can adjust what's currently in the snapshot. There's also another facet here in terms of this text box. This is also fully customizable. Of course, you can enter whatever text you want. This is used in a plethora of different ways, but some of the common ways is, even if we're using this as a PDF report space, this is also a thing that can be included in PDF reports. This is also if we're going to be talking about this live in person or screen sharing, the text box is still relevant for all those different scenarios. But with the text box, you can add here our agenda for the meeting or key takeaways for the client. It's commonly utilized to talk about those two things or just having that little bit more of a streamlined communication with the client. So let's say this is going to be our agenda. We're going to be reviewing our proposal. Let's discuss our asset allocation. And oftentimes people will leave their calendar link as well here. So you can include those levels of details, have that kind of streamlined communication here. But if that's the case, and this is actually going to be our key takeaway points for the client, or maybe our agenda for our meeting, that's probably when we actually want to retitle this instead of it saying notes. So you can click on the title for this text box, and we can say that this is going to be our agenda or key takeaways or whatever we want to title this text box. And we can hit save. So it's just a nice way to have that touch point for the conversation. And that's how you can customize what's included here and address what your agenda or takeaways might be. But this is also commonly utilized, the snapshot, as a presentation hub. This is going to be relevant for if we are presenting live in person or screen sharing. The snapshot hub, and the reason why it can be leveraged as that, is as you can see, you can talk about a plethora of different key pain points that you might be commonly addressing with a client, such as their current allocation, their probability success, their balance sheet, their tax allocation, those stress tests that we brought in. What makes this a presentation hub is if you hover over any of these widgets, you'll see an arrow icon populate. So we can touch on the high level conversation here in the snapshot, but when we're ready to move on to a deeper discussion about our probability of success, for example, and what our proposed plan is, we can click on the arrow icon here, and this will bring us to the module in which we are pulling this information from. So it's going to bring us to the retirement analysis, where we're going to see that probability of success, and we can have that deeper dive discussion about what our probability of success means, those 1,000 trials of market volatility, aka the Monte Carlo simulations. It's that percentage of trials that make it to the end of plan without running out of money. And you can also navigate to the action items to see the difference between your proposal versus current plan and how we got to a higher probability of success as compared to our current path in life. So this is just a streamlined way to have a more efficient conversation if we are presenting in this way. Same thing if we were talking about the balance sheet on a higher level, we wanted to have a deeper dive discussion and see exactly what's making up the balance sheet and those details. We can click on that arrow icon and it'll bring us to the details of the balance sheet module. So it's just a way to have a little bit more of an efficient and a fine-tuned narrative when presenting directly in RightCapital. Once again, this is fully customizable on the individual client level, so you can tailor this as is necessary for each of your client meetings and leverage this as a presentation tactic in your toolbox as we were talking about earlier. Some of the other ways that you can kind of present in RightCapital, especially continuing the conversation when we are presenting live, in person, or screen sharing, that's going to be accessible if we just click on into our advisor portal and we just search for the client. One of the ways that we can present in RightCapital is going to be what we call that client access mode, aka the client presentation mode. Where this becomes relevant is under the planning access tab. This is where we can start to open up in that client access mode by clicking on the downward arrow. But before we do so, it's important to note that anything that we have selected in the planning access tab here is what we will see when we open up in the client access mode. So we can establish our narrative here of what we want to cover. We want to talk about dashboard snapshot, the balance sheet, maybe our liquidity, if we wanted to talk about debt management, our asset allocation. We can also incorporate our analysis and that probability of success. Maybe the cash flows is relevant as well. There are a couple things that you'll notice. There are certain modules that are underlined. So anytime we see something underlined in RightCapital, this is going to be a flag waving that you can click into it to see additional functionality. For the planning access tabs, this means that you can click into it to start to further fine-tune the narrative that you're sharing here. As we know with analysis and cash flows, there can be a lot of different sub-tabs that can be addressed. This allows for you to really fine-tune that here. So we can say we're not going to be talking about the confidence chart. Maybe we're just focusing on the comparisons and probability tab. So we're going to keep that selected. We're trying to isolate just the blueprint, and let's hit save. Now we can click on the downward arrow and open in client access mode. When we do so, you're going to see a more focused conversation. This is of course relevant for if we're presenting live, in person, or screen sharing. You can see here this is going to be very isolated to exactly what we had selected and to the exact pain points that we're going to be talking about in our client meeting. So we can still talk about that dashboard snapshot, have that conversation about what our agenda is, discuss the balance sheet, isolate the investment asset allocation, discuss some of the different sub-tabs in the analysis and retirement cash flows, and also isolating the blueprint. You can still make changes here, of course. You can still adjust any of these blueprint or net worth items as needed. But some of the other things that makes this a powerful presentation tool is that when you are reaching out to our fantastic support team, let's say we're leveraging the chat feature. If they responded to you while we were in this client presentation mode, we would not see that response, as this is going to be an uninterrupted presentation mode. As you can see, that chat bubble has now disappeared from the screen before we were seeing it when we were opening up the client plan normally, which means that if our support team followed up with you and answered any questions you might have had, that would pop up. But this is going to be a way that you can have a really uninterrupted presentation mode. Another thing is that you can fully customize the narrative with RightCapital, and that is going to be true for this client presentation mode. So once again, clicking into planning access, where we can set the tone for what we're talking about, where we check off what we want to include in the client presentation mode. But just as we did in the snapshot, you can also reorder the flow of what we're discussing. So let's say, for example, kind of most times we're talking about the current plan first and having that check-in conversation about what that looks like. We can also drag and drop each of these modules to reorder the flow of what we're going to be talking about. So let's bring profile up to the top. Let's bring blueprint, because we can also reorder the sub-tabs to be the first thing that we could address. And maybe we want to talk about our debt in between balance sheet and liquidity. And let's hit save. Now, when we click on the downward arrow and open in client access mode, we're going to see an entirely different experience here. It's going to be highlighting exactly what we have selected and what we just reordered. So it's going to be an entirely different presentation tactic that you can really fine tune to create that narrative and hitting all those pain points that you want to be discussing and just a little bit of a smoother context. So you can still make all those changes, still have that flow established and still look at the snapshot, but you can really have a smoother conversation that's facilitated via the client presentation mode. Another important aspect when we're talking about presentation, whether this is from the live presentation modes that we've been discussing or PDF reports, which we're going to dive into a little bit more detail in a couple minutes, is that as you might have noticed, as we're navigating throughout each of the modules, especially when we talked about snapshot, for example, there is the option to leave notes throughout each of the modules. So with the snapshot, we use those text boxes to have that open line of communication with the client about what the key take-home points were or agenda for our client meeting. But you'll also find throughout the remaining modules of RightCapital and throughout each of the different net worth entries or profile entries, in each of those cards, you have the option to leave a note. So for example, in the retirement analysis, in the action items, you'll see here the notes section. If we click on the notes section, this will allow for us to add a note. So especially if we are trying to establish a little bit of a narrative or at least painting some color as to what we're referring to, you can leave a note here for the client. So even if we're downloading a PDF report and we just want that to be included in the PDF report, or if we have the client here with us live, or if we've invited them to have access to RightCapital, for example, and we want them to have some key insights as to what our proposal is or anything that we wanted to talk about in the retirement analysis, you can leave this note here. So we can say, we are indicating you're retiring earlier. As discussed, so you can leave that kind of note of maybe what you discussed. But you can also leave a note for yourself as well. So we can mark this as not shared with the client by clicking on the eye icon. And especially if we wanted to leave a note as a resource for ourselves, maybe the last time we reviewed this, we can have that key insight just for ourselves or for our own record keepings, or maybe something that we might have changed that we just wanted that little bit of a record for. Anything that we mark as not visible to the client would not be included in PDF reports, would not be visible to a client if they logged in, if we've chosen to engage them in that way, and also wouldn't be visible if we were in that client presentation mode or when we're looking at this just on the higher level, for example. But that's how you can start to incorporate some additional ways of communication with the client, especially just a way to make it a little bit more of a personal experience for them. If you wanted to leave those key insights for them, you do always have that option. When we're talking about notes though, it is important to note that if we navigate to the three dots in the upper right-hand corner and into the note section, this is also where you can manage your existing notes. So if you just needed to check in to see exactly what you have for your plan notes across the entire modules of RightCapital, you can also customize those existing ones from here. So if we needed to make adjustments, we could. You can also delete them. This would be for all the different modules of RightCapital and just a space for you to manage them. Under advisor notes, this is going to be a space that is purely internal facing. This is only for the advisor. Clients would not see the advisor notes that are included here. This is a space for you to leave private notes for yourself, whether it be about key insights about a client's behavior or maybe something that they're considering. If they're getting married soon, you wanted to leave a note here that they're getting married in 2026. You can add that note here about that client behavior or that personal aspect you want to make sure you're remembering, or even after a client meeting, if you wanted to leave some notes about what you discussed in the meeting, you can also do so within the individual client plan under the three dots and under the note section under advisor notes. So it's a lot of different ways you can have open lines of communication to the client, but also ways for you to store records or have a space to look at all the records for a particular client. But now that we have discussed how you can really present live in person or screen sharing, the different tactics when it comes to client presentation mode versus snapshot, next up is going to be our PDF reports, which can be downloaded still in the three dots in the report section. Once again, three dots and under report, This is where you can curate the narrative for a PDF report. So we can include, once again, the snapshot if we wanted to address that, the balance sheet, the liquidity, maybe the asset allocation once again. You'll also see analysis and cash flows are once again underlined. So that flag is waving that we can click into it. And for the PDF reports, you can also customize what's included for those sub tabs as well. So maybe we don't want to be discussing everything that is available in analysis. We wanted to fine tune it a little bit. We can easily do so. You can also click on the select plans toggle, and this will allow for you to select multiple proposals and include that probability of success and action items in the PDF report. This is really relevant for if we have more than 2 plans entered in the system, of course, because the current plan and proposed plan will be considered. But if we have multiple proposals, as I do, we can actually include all 3 of my plans in this PDF report. Similar thing for Blueprint. We can also choose to hide page numbers when downloading a PDF report. This will, of course, hide the page numbers, and this can be helpful for if we are presenting and we're using the PDF deliverable and we need to make some changes or reorder the flow for any reason. You can do so without there being a number discrepancy. And then once we're ready, we can click on the download selected pages button and we'll download a PDF report of everything that we just curated. With the PDF report, this is utilized in a couple different ways. Of course, you can have that as the presentation tactic, but this is also something that can be leveraged as a hybrid presentation tactic as well. I've seen that, people will include, or advisors will include, the PDF report as a take-home deliverable for what they discussed during a client meeting, or they'll have just an isolated conversation directly from the PDF report. So there's a lot of different ways you can incorporate PDF reports, whether you want it to be also intertwined with your live presentation as that key take-home piece for the client of what you discussed, or if you just want to use this as that deliverable as well. So we can see here, we're going to have our report cover page and also everything that we just selected. So we're going to be including that snapshot, that agenda that we have included in snapshot. And if we had any notes or any of the other modules like the balance sheet, we would also see it included here as well. So this is what it would look like if we downloaded a PDF report. And if we like what we have curated there, you can choose to save that as a template. So if we like that narrative for the PDF report, let's click Save New Template. We can title that template for our ease, hit save. And now going forward, when we want to download a PDF report, we can click on Select Template and choose from the template dropdown whichever one you want to utilize for your PDF reports. And that will automatically check off whatever you have selected from that template. But there is another capability when we're talking about PDF reports where you can further tailor the conversation. So you can, of course, include or exclude whichever modules you want to discuss in your presentation, but you also have the option to reorder this flow as well. So if we wanted to actually discuss, once again, profile first, for example, we can drag and drop the profile to be the first thing we discuss. And maybe we want to talk about retirement analysis as the first thing this time. We can make these changes. We can reorder the sub-tabs as desired. And that would change that PDF deliverable flow. You can also save this as a new template. This will only be impacting the PDF reports. It's not going to be impacting any of the other modules of the RightCapital. So you can leverage this as just a resource in terms of streamlining that report curation with some of those templates and just quickly toggling between those different ones. As you can see, when you toggle between different templates, all of that's going to be pre-filled, and we can still continue to build off of those templates as well. But going back into our advisor portal, especially when we're talking about those templates, it is important to note that in our advisor portal, if we click on the gear icon, template section, this is where you can manage and establish templates for all the different sections that we were discussing as presentation modes today. The first one being our reports. So here's where we can manage existing report templates. So if I needed to retitle one of my report templates, this isn't report template number 3 anymore, this is report template number 1. We can click on that pencil icon, hit the check mark to save the name change. We can also include or exclude additional sections. for our PDF report. And we can hit save. This is also where you can delete templates as well. So if you make one too many, you can always hit the delete button back here in your advisor portal under gear icon templates report. We can also create templates directly here as needed. So if we wanted to create one, we don't need to do it necessarily in an individual client plan. That's just for your ease of use. So a lot of functionality here for creating report templates, but the same is true for planning access. So especially if we're using the planning access, that client presentation mode, we have a narrative that we've established that we like to use. And especially as there are a lot of different clients you might be discussing and having conversations with, they might be having different pain points that you're addressing. If there's a lot of common things that you touch upon in those conversations, and we're using the client presentation mode, you can create multiple planning access templates to quickly toggle between before client meetings. So under planning access, you can add a new template here, start to, similar to the planning access tab, check off and reorder as desired to establish that flow. You can also apply templates directly from here for planning access. So let's say we did establish one that we love. We want to apply it to all of our clients. We can do so efficiently from here. We can also apply it to our client groups as needed, or individual clients from our list as well. The same is true for Snapshot. So if we are using Snapshot, whether it be for PDF deliverables, in-person presentations, whether it be using Snapshot as a presentation hub or live screen sharing, the Snapshot template is going to be relevant for it all. So especially if you like to have certain widgets and certain pieces of information always included, that's a great opportunity to establish a Snapshot template and alleviate some of those repetitive changes you might have been making to Snapshot to reflect what you want to reflect. So we can curate and add a new template from here. We can add additional items. You can also add text boxes and add some additional notes. If you have a standard of what you would incorporate for that agenda and maybe your calendar link, you can add that here. So that way that's going to alleviate just another thing for you. And we can once again apply templates from here as well to all clients, to those client groups, or to those individual clients as needed. You also have the ability to add templates for tasks if you're choosing to engage clients in this way, or just having internal workflows, and also for vault folders as well. So there's just some of the other template functionalities, but for our presentation tactics, that's going to be revolving around the report, planning access, and snapshot templates. Another thing, when we are trying to truly align our presentations with how we want to represent ourselves, now that we've discussed how to really fine-tune that narrative and have that discussion with a client, it is important to note that there's another layer of how you can customize how you present yourself into RightCapital. So especially as we were looking at that cover page of the report, as we can see, you know, my address, it just says Street City, California. There are some adjustments we want to be making. That would be done by navigating into our advisor portal, once again, going into the gear icon and under account. Here's where we'll find our profile. And if you haven't already gotten the chance to do so, just take a couple minutes to fill this out, as this is exactly what we're pulling from for those PDF reports. So my Street City address is stemming from this entry right here. You want to make sure you're making those adjustments to reflect accurately for that report cover page. And also, of course, addressing your proper certification honors as needed. And this is also where, when we're talking about PDF reports, you can add additional disclosures. When we download a PDF report in RightCapital, there are disclosures automatically incorporated in the PDF reports. This is just a space down here where you can add your own additional layers of disclosures. If it is mandated by compliance or for any reason, you need to add an additional layer of disclosures on top of what's already included in the PDF report, you do have that option down here as well. Once we have that aligned to make sure that that is all accurate for how we want it to display, especially on those PDF report cover pages and disclosures in general, next up is going to be our customization tab. This is where you can establish a brand within RightCapital, both when we are presenting live, if we're screen sharing RightCapital and navigating throughout the system, or if we're using the PDF reports, you can also establish what you want to see for your color theme in RightCapital, and also if you want to upload a logo. So if you do want to upload your own logo and you don't want to use RightCapital's anymore, you can do so by just hovering over the logo section. We can click update, and we can either drag and drop files directly here. We can pick specific files from our computer, or we can upload from one of these various sources as well. That would be how we can upload those logos directly to RightCapital. That would be relevant for our PDF reports, but also when we're navigating throughout the system, it would replace RightCapitals in the upper left-hand corner. Next up is adjusting our color theme. So right now we're using the white and beige defaults of RightCapital, but if you wanted to make adjustments to those color themes, you can do so by clicking into this field, and you can choose to enter a hex code, which is what this random string of numbers and letters is representing. Especially if you've got a press kit, you can just enter that here. But if you don't have that, it's no worries. You can just click on the hashtag to the left, and this will open up a color wheel where we can start to fine tune the color that we have selected. Once we like that color, as you can see down below, we'll see a client preview. This would be what it would look like if we chose to save this as our color theme when navigating throughout RightCapital. We can do the same thing for the secondary color. So you can kind of play around here to get that color that we like from the color wheel if desired, but you also have the option to utilize this color picker. So we can use this, especially if we uploaded our own logo, we wanted to use the RightCapital blue logo color for our secondary color. You can select that from your screen. As you can see, this would be what it would look like for that preview if we use this as our color theme in RightCapital, especially if we're navigating throughout it in our presentations, or if we have a client engaged in RightCapital, this would be the color theme we'd be using if we hit save. So if we did hit save, and if we change our minds later on down the road, you can always hit the reset button, and that will reset it back to the RightCapital defaults of that white and beige. But when we're talking about those PDF reports, there is another layer of customizability. So if we like what we have as our color theme in RightCapital and we want to use that, but maybe we don't want that to be what we have in our PDF report cover page, you do have the option from this drop down to not include those colors on the PDF report cover page if desired. So there is an additional flexibility in terms of what you're seeing for that presentation in the PDF report. And so that's how you can kind of fine tune what you're including there. Another thing that is really important for when we are having presentations in RightCapital and we're presenting our first plans, especially in RightCapital, some of the resources that you have in general, those are going to be found in the help button in the upper right hand corner of our advisor dashboard. Here's where we're going to find our help center. We're going to find a lot of really helpful links or articles, I should say, that walk through the data entry process. You can find things on different knowledge base for the different modules of RightCapital, but this is also where you can find a lot of those training videos and our webinars. So you can sign up for upcoming webinars to take deeper dives into specific topics. But if you can't attend live, that's no worries. You can always watch these previously recorded webinars. They'll be uploaded here. So if you wanted to take a deeper dive into the retirement analysis and creating those proposals, you can always watch this recording and do some light binge watching of RightCapital content over the weekend, of course. But another resource that you have is going to be under Contact Us support. This is a way to reach out to our fantastic support team, especially as you are creating your proposals and looking to present in RightCapital. There is the opportunity to book a one-on-one dedicated session to have a second set of eyes on your case before you present, or just answer a list of questions you might have, or walk through some data entry. Highly recommended that this is a great resource that you can leverage. You can also use that chat feature, as we discussed earlier, to message the team to ask questions. And you can also call into the helpline to ask immediate questions as well. You also, of course, have the option to email in.